Alors, rebonjour pour ceux qui étaient là ce matin. Welcome back for those who were here this morning. Ça va être en anglais. This is going to be in English, this presentation, because we have a collaborator who's going to be with us from Vancouver, A. Thomas Goldberg. I will start talking a little bit about myself and the Sadua while we are... Yay, Thomas is there. Thanks for being with us live from Vancouver in our Seven Fingers studio in Montreal. So yeah, we are here to talk about a project that's called the LiViCi project. It was initiated by A. Thomas. I guess you guys know me by now, but so I'm one of the co-founders of Seven Fingers. Seven Fingers is a creation collective. We founded the company 20 years ago. We have such a wide range of projects, and every one is very different. So I was kind of involved. I got involved with A. Thomas in this one. So A. Thomas, maybe a quick word about you?
Sure. So I'm A. Thomas Goldberg. I have been working in computer animation, primarily interactive computer animation, video games, VR, for close to 30 years now. But I actually began my career in theater as a designer, as a sort of lighting and production designer for theater. And sort of theater has been kind of in my blood. My wife is a theater producer. And so after many years, it kind of finally got to a point where I felt like the technologies were finally in place where I could sort of bring together, into something sort of special, and that's what eventually led to the formation of Shocap and this partnership with the Seven Fingers.
Thanks. So I have a slide about Seven Fingers. I guess everyone knows us, and I just mentioned a little bit about what we do. Maybe I should say that myself, I was a trained circus performer. I still perform. I'm trained as a hand balancer, and the collective of circus performer became a collective of creators over the years. And as I said, we have a very wide range of projects. Now, I Thomas, a little bit about Shocap.
Sure. So Shocap Entertainment was founded in 2020, and basically sort of to carry forward a project that we began actually in 2019, this collaboration with the Seven Fingers around producing an original sort of live circus performance. And we'll get into all the details in just a minute about that. But Shocap was started by myself and my co-founder, Brett Einesen, who was also the sort of president and CTO of Animatrik Film Design, one of the sort of leading motion capture studios in the world. And so together, sort of we took this project and approached the Seven Fingers and eventually Sam to bring it to reality.
So in 2019, A. Thomas came to us in Montreal, and he was like, I have this vision, this kind of dream. I'd like to create a circus show using real-time motion capture, with the idea, as he explained to me, to create some kind of a double event type of performance, where you would see both the puppeteers and the puppet. And as in a puppet show, especially like adult puppeteering show, it's always interesting and fascinating to see kind of the story between the puppeteers on stage, and they might have some relation and some kind of underlying story, and then the puppets themselves who have their own other layer of story. So that was kind of a bit how he's introduced to me this idea of a live and virtual circus show. And I needed to understand, as a show creator, what was possible to imagine in terms of new artistic language possibilities, and what we could do with these technologies. We're talking about real-time motion capture and game engine and virtual production tools that are normally reserved for big movies and large-scale productions and video games, and usually everything is done in post-production. So I needed to understand a bit what we could do with that. And A. Thomas invited me in his studio in Vancouver at Animatrik Film Design, which is a large-scale motion capture studio. And there, that was in January 2020, so a bit more than 2 years ago already, that I discovered mind-blowing possibilities, because suddenly you could really invent this kind of new stage language combining live performance with some kind of an animated film cinematographic experience. So there'll be more about this later on in the presentation. But what was also interesting for me is that while since we are kind of creating a double event, so there's a version of the stage show that is a virtual show, and it exists in the virtual space, then you can also reach live audiences through different ways. So maybe a quick word about this concept, A. Thomas.
Sure. So this is something we frequently refer to as the four audience model. And the idea is that we're bringing a show in front of a live audience, where we're using real-time motion capture and real-time animation to sort of tell a story and sort of create a relationship between the live performers and sort of this sort of visual poetry that we create on stage. And then because we're using these real-time technologies, in particular we're using real-time interactive technologies, there's an opportunity, or we saw an opportunity, to then invite audiences kind of beyond just the audience that's in the theater, sort of into the experience, where we could bring a remote audience. Certainly we could live stream the production as we might any other live stream, but we could also bring a remote audience of game players and people using virtual reality sort of into the world of the projections that we're displaying on stage, where they could watch the live performance sort of from within the digital world of those projections. And then ultimately sort of create a different sort of unique experience and perspective on that live performance, and then eventually explore how we can then build relationships between those audiences so that we have this experience that is sort of shared but different and unique to each audience and how they experience it.
So now I'll show you a teaser that we have starting right away. I didn't want it to start right away, so a teaser that we made from the images of the first prototype of this kind of live and virtual circus show that we did in Vancouver last June in Animatrik motion capture studio. And that is the teaser of now the stage show, the first prototype of a stage show that we will do here in Montreal. So the show in Vancouver was also presented in front of an audience, a live audience, and that's what we will do here in December. The concept and the complexity of putting together a show that exists both in with real people in front of real audience and with live online participants is a bit mind-blowing. So let's watch this, and then we can go back to some of the details of what we see. And yeah, this is a bit of a mix of the stage experience and kind of the live stream experience, or the broadcast of the show that we will see here.
Frustrated from the lack of smooth sailing, let it tighten. You hit a zone of turbulation, you're gonna let your neck brace, cause soon up with the levee breaks, the skin on the wall paint, later percolated truth that's guided from across. The grief's on the canvas, baby, it's about to bounce, my love, and how this came to be as a howling habit. I still can't with you. You say you love a friend. sweet treats got me blocking major arteries, and ooh, every time my body goes to lead, strange limousine, I pull over. How low, am I willing? How low, till I'm ready for, ooh, every time my body goes to leave, strange limousine, I pull over. How low, till I'm willing? How low.
So, yeah. So the idea behind this first concert, it's called Carry Me Home. It's based on the songs and lyrics of a circus artist or not quite turn, he's still an amazing acrobat, but he was also a singer, songwriter, and musician. So Carry Me Home is actually the title of one of his songs. And the idea behind the show was to kind of pay a tribute to the mind's incredible capacity to dream, imagine, and create. So we wanted to invite the audience inside the creative mind, the creative brain of an artist. And then the physical show as a physical venue, but the virtual show needed a virtual venue. So we imagined that the whole show, the whole concert would be actually happening inside a giant brain building, some kind of a meta brain that contains the data, the storage of the collective consciousness, and then for that specific show with Didier's music that would contain Didier's memory in series of corridors and rooms and archiving rooms and filled with objects and artifacts and videos and images that are part of Didier's kind of inspiration and imagination. So I need to switch this one. So I talked a little bit about Didier. As I said, he's this amazing acrobat who's a trampolinist and who's also this great musician. So the idea in the creative process was to discuss with Didier the meaning of his lyrics, the stories behind his song, a bit also about his own personal journey, and to source the inspiration for the different environments of the show based on these backstories and lyrics and the meaning of all of that. So we've imagined virtual environments and imagine series of virtual characters that would kind of give life to Didier's songs and Didier's memories or imagination. And in the process, we needed to also see what we could use in terms of like digital assets, in terms of virtual production in what exists already, because there's kind of a marketplace of things that exist in Unreal Engine, which is the game engine that we're using. So there's things that are already available for video games builder. So, of course, it's really costly to create everything from scratch. So a big part of the environments are created using things that exist already. And then some specific things were created, customized for these different universes that were going to give life to the different songs of Didier. So in the concert, we are doing 5 songs altogether. And each song correspond to a visual environment. And the idea of the puppet and puppeteers here, you can see on the screen, the performers on stage, they're a bit dressed like this, storage industrial building, and they are kind of the neurons in Didier's brain. So they are the workers that are there to sort out memories and archives and actually bring to life the characters in Didier's mind. So in this scene, Carry Me Home, Didier is sitting on a table, but he's actually sitting on a rowboat, and he's watching the shed behind the childhood house as he's kind of, remembering this childhood time. And we see him on the shore playing with his brother. So it's one of the 2 artists on stage is playing Didier's brother, and the other one is playing Didier. So it's kind of him seeing himself as he was a kid. So that's the idea of the puppet and the puppeteers that we see on stage. And then the idea throughout the show is to give portals for both audiences, for the in-person audience to see the virtual world. So that's what we saw in the picture before, the video screen in the back, and that's what we see on the picture on the right side. the video screen in the back allows the audience to both see the puppeteers and the virtual world inside Didier's head. And then in the left side, we are now inside the VR experience. So you can be participating in the experience wearing a VR headset or on a gaming console or a gaming computer. And you have your own avatar, and you can move in the space, explore the different environments. So if, as an in-game participant, I'm watching the avatars and I'm immersed in the avatars, I can see the statue singing because it's mocap, facial mocap with Didier singing on stage. So the statue is singing, it's kind of Didier singing there. And then in the Mirage, there's a video feed that is embedded within the virtual world so that the virtual audience that are at home in front of their computers or in-game can also see the live performers on stage. So you can choose where you look at, and if you want to focus for a moment on the puppeteers, or if you prefer to be immersed in the puppet world, you can do that. And to create that is a bit of a technical challenge because you have 5 cameras, physical cameras, all around the performing space that are filming the action, and that is being streamed into the virtual world. And then the live stream experience is a combination of the direct feed of the video cameras and the live virtual video feed with all the virtual cameras that are in the 3D environment. Looking at the time, we're keeping track. I wanted to talk a little bit about also one of the things that I discovered that is truly amazing for me as a director. I've been dreaming for years to imagine a device that would be a bit like a lavalier microphone that performers can, or tiny microphone that performers can wear on stage, and even if you're in the last row, you can hear them talk. So I wanted to have a similar idea of a camera that actors could wear on stage, and then if you are in an intimate moment, you can film the POV of an actor talking to the other one and project that. So it's almost like a cinematographic theatrical experience at once. So it's a bit tricky to do that in real life, but in the virtual world, you can embed virtual cameras in the head of each of the performers. So you can, as you see here on the right side, at some point switch to a virtual camera mode that is giving the point of view of Didier, who's like, what's going on? And he's looking at this performer running away from him, but in fact, he's not there. He's on some dystopic science fiction tropical island, seeing this warrior like welcoming him in this space, So you can use that in a cinematographic way for the stage experience. And in the virtual experience, if you're a multiplayer, you can talk to your friends that are maybe playing the video game, like in Fortnite and all of these other video games. But you can also activate different modes. So you can switch to any given POV of a performer on stage. You can switch camera angles. And yeah, that's kind of what you can do. You can even go to a free roam mode, which is kind of a free cam mode where you can actually kind of get out of your avatar's body and fly anywhere you want in the space. So you can actually access point of views that are not accessible for the stage audience. So if you want to be, looking at the scene as if you were lying down just beneath the teeterboard act, then you can lay down and see that from there. Or you can have a bird's eye view and everything, and as I said, have all of that freedom of movement. So a bit of a segue to the behind-the-scene demo, and I don't know if it's going to start right away. Maybe we'll see. Yes, I'll just pause it. So the behind-the-scene demo, of course, it's so much complexity to put a live version of this, so it's not post-produced, but it's all happening live. We'll look at this, and then Thomas, that's going to be your segment to tell us all about what goes behind the scene. So let's see this video. All yours. Hey, Thomas.
Terrific. So I can just see the slide that's up.
We're talking about motion capture technology and the trad mocap active markers and costumes.
Thanks, guys. So many of you may be familiar already with motion capture technology. For those of you who aren't, it's a technique used in film and video games to capture the movement of a performer so that it can be then mapped onto the movement of a 3D animated character. There are a lot of different techniques for doing motion capture, but the gold standard, I would say sort of the highest fidelity, highest quality motion capture techniques are generally optical techniques. And if anyone's seen, any video or anything on motion capture or clips, you may be familiar with these sort of little reflective markers that DDA and the other performers are wearing there and are in rehearsal. The system basically works by reflecting infrared light, which is then picked up by a set of cameras. In the case of this show, there's about 80 of those cameras that are used. And then together, they're able to very precisely track the movement and position of each of the performers during their performance. As Sam mentioned earlier, one of the goals of this production and really of this whole approach that we're taking is to create sort of theatrical experiences in which we can sort of create a performance on stage that exists sort of in relationship with what's being presented, projected. And so it was sort of critical for us that we don't have performers on stage with little reflective markers. Is sort of, once we do that, they are mocap performers, and that's really the only kind of story we can tell with that. And so the first thing we had to do was develop a technique whereby we could actually use the same motion capture system, but use it with sort of traditional theatrical costumes. And what we developed for this was a system of sort of very small battery-powered infrared markers that could then be placed in and underneath the performer's costumes. So now we got the same effect as these traditional mocap suits, but kind of in a format that or in a form that actually let us design costumes that could to tell a story.
Hey, Thomas, we can. I'll move to the next slide about physical and virtual sets. Yep. And we have about 8 minutes or so left.
Yeah, I can see that. So I'll move quickly. The other sort of critical thing that we have here is that because we're not just mapping the movement from the real performers to the virtual performers. We're doing that within an actual physical space. And so the other key piece of this is that in each of the environments where we're going to have these animated characters move, we create these. We have to map and create this sort of one-to-one correspondence with the physical set upon which the performers will be moving. And you can kind of see this as an example. On the left, we see the real set, and then on the right, you can kind of see in overlay how that set actually maps onto the surfaces that the virtual characters will be moving on. You can go on to the next slide.
Yep.
Unless you wanted to add to that.
There's a virtual stage management and all that complexity. Yeah.
Yep. And just sort of kind of real quickly, part of what we did to sort of facilitate then, now we've got the data, we've got the world, we need the ability to actually, sort of coordinate this and choreograph all this in real time during the performance, and then distribute that to the different channels. And so we built a system called Ringmaster that lets us take in audio and video from cameras and microphones and soundboards, show control from programs like QLab, Ableton, Isadora, and then various different motion capture systems, in this case an Optitrack system that we use Animatrik, sort of feed that into a broadcast system, which is then sort of distributed out over the internet through servers that can be then projected on the LED wall, sent to a live stream, but then that very same data is also then sent sort of anywhere someone's connected to via gaming PC or desktop VR. And then people who are using this, we can actually specify cues that get sent to everyone, and effects that get sent to everyone, and then also we can have different effects and different sort of videos and different audio and so forth sent to each of the different sources. And you can continue from there. That's kind of in a high level of how we then get the system from the stage, out into the world.
And it is quite mind-blowing, the complexity to get all of this working together. But at the same time, I think it's also, I see a great opportunity in some ways for live arts that maybe like large shows, touring large shows, is expensive. So if you consider a large show touring versus a permanent large show that can run in a city, and then whoever is in that city or is visiting the city can come and see it. But if you're not there, then you can also have a quite interesting virtual experience of it. And both experiences, I think, are also kind of complementary, where they're different. They're really different experiences. It's not like the in-game is replacing the stage show or vice versa. They're different things. So I think if you've experienced a show in person, then I mean, if you're the kind of person that plays video games or that is interested in VR experiences, then it's a whole different way to experiment it. It's a bit like a live animated movie kind of thing, So yeah, there's really a complementary experience, I think, with this. And this is kind of where we are at now. The project was funded notably by Epic Games. We got a mega grant from Epic Games, the video company that is now interested in using their Unreal Engine for different applications than just pure video games. And also the Canada Media Fund that has given us a prototyping fund and then a production fund. So this is what allowed us to create this first prototype, and if you're curious to see it, you can see it in Montreal, right here in this room, December 15, 16, 17, 16, 17th of December. So yeah, that's it. If there's some questions, we have a little bit of time. So a little 5 minutes of questions, if there are any questions.
Oui, je me demandais comment vous réagissiez au problème des délais entre la vidéo et la capture, puis le fait que vous retransmettiez ce qui est numérisé en live dans le monde virtuel, ça aussi cause un délai. Alors, comment vous arrivez à gérer ça au niveau des mouvements pour la synchronisation et tout?
So the question, Thomas, I'll repeat it in English, is about the transmission delays between the action on stage and the live mocap and the recopying of that mocap on the screen, and also the challenge of then having a satisfying delay with what is being streamed online to remote participants. And I'll let you explain the details, but I can tell you from my experience that the delay between the stage action and the video behind is really, really impressively tight. You notice it on the trampoline a little bit, and I'm saying it's a little, so it's not too bad. And in Vancouver, we were with a LED wall that added a bit more delay than a regular projection, so I'm expecting this to be even a bit more tight. Then the online thing, that's a whole other story, and I'll let Thomas explain that.
Sure, so real quick, as Sam mentioned, when we're projecting on the screen behind the performer, we're actually going straight from the mocap, and we're kind of bypassing the internet and going straight to the screen. So we're really getting the absolute sort of minimum delay there possible. With regard to what goes out to the world, the key thing here is that when we send out the mocap data, the audio, the video, and the show control data, it's actually all bundled up into a single stream. So there is a delay, and that delay will vary slightly depending on where you are. We're using a very sort of low latency network, but the key thing is that all of the data that arrives at your interactive experience is arriving at the same time. So even though you may be seeing the performers like a moment or two behind where it's actually happening, time-wise in the world, you're still getting experience where all of the elements are happening simultaneously. And so you're not experiencing that delay in that way.
What is the delay actually for the the actual action on stage? We're talking a few seconds, 10 seconds, more than that? Like the whole, package of what is being streamed?
In terms of how long is that delay?
Yeah.
Typically, it's generally under, under 3 seconds in our experience, and often quite, even smaller than that, depending on where it's going to.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we will actually be testing in December, because we want to have the in-person audience at some point interact with the people that are online watching the show from somewhere else. So to create a live moment between these two audiences. So if it's a 2 or 3 seconds delay, it's kind of being on a bad phone call, it's manageable. Yeah. If it's more...
and just to that point, it's actually the technology that we're using to distribute in the low latency network is basically the similar kind of low latency networks that are used for a Zoom call and so forth. So kind of the same types of delay and the same, are what you would experience, but it's generally, it's designed to be really, really as tight as possible. But the key thing there is, because we're not doing really sort of high frequency or really precise interaction between the audience and the performers, they're not going up and shaking their hands directly. The experience for the remote performer is as if it's happening right away. Like they're not, because when they see the live video and the music along with the motion, it's all coming in together, synchronized.
So maybe one more, but then someone is going to have to tell us when we have to stop. We're a little bit over time.
Because I have a very open-ended question that will not be easy to answer, but I'm curious about the, I guess, creative or artistic trade-off between doing a live show where you're directing everyone's gaze in the same room onto the stage, and the VR experience, which is very individual and where you're giving them freedom to explore and to move around. But then it's sort of the added challenge is that if it's in real time and someone is looking the other way in the VR experience, they're missing something that's happening. So I'm curious about that trade-off.
And that is a really good question. And if we have 2 or 3 more minutes, I'd like to expand a little bit on this, because I don't know who was the question this morning, but for me, this is a key thing to find how we can create these experiences that ultimately will be engaging its specific audience. So if you're on stage in front of an audience, then there should be a real connection and something should be lived that is unique to the in-venue experience. And if you are participating online, then it's a different kind of experience, but that also needs to become meaningful and somewhat engaging and transformative potentially. And, coming from stage performance and coming from circus where we sweat and our muscle burns and ache and we like that proximity, for me, nothing is never going to replace that pureness that François was talking about this morning, where you have a stage, a spotlight, and darkness, and there's a moment there, But again, I think that these technologies, they allow a different form of experience, different art form, and it's like inventing a new language. Like there was, cinema. Before cinema, there was not cinema. So this is like the language in a way of video games, but to use it in a more, I think, potentially meaningful way, a social experience where you can talk to each other and so on. So to go more to the specific of your question, this is my greatest challenge every day in this project, and how to create these meaningful experiences, finding the right rhythm and the right transitions and the right coherence for the stage experience and the virtual experience, and all of the rhythm of a stage show and transition, you're moving props. So we need to think ahead of what's happening in the virtual world. So it's really built on a video game platform, and now it's built on Unreal Engine 5. So each song there, they used to be their own level. So there was a time needed for reload. So what would happen with the online participants during the reload? So now we've put everything in one level because it's Unreal 5. So then I can teleport people, the virtual audience, to a starting point for each song or each moment. So I'm kind of curating part of that experience and telling them, now you should be here. If you're not here, you're blinking your eyes and you appear here. And then I'm giving you kind of the angle where you should see what you should see, then you're free to explore, and that's the game. You can venture away from the act if you want and go somewhere else. And there's also different moments where it's encouraged to be free roaming and to be venturing and to be exploring, to have a bit of a side kind of story experience. In the pre-show and the post-show, you can explore the brain building, go into the different rooms, check out the data of Didier, read the books he read, hear some quotes, watch some videos. And then there's some moments where we are putting people where they have to be, and then we shut off the voice action. So suddenly the people that are playing, like there are cohorts of about 30 to 50 players online. So in some moments they can talk to each other, see their virtual avatars, and other moments then you cannot talk and you're just watching something kind of thing. So sorry, that was a long answer. I guess we have to end this here. So thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas, for having made of time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.